Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2021 Virtual African American Caregivers Forum, Legacy of Love. My name is Margaret Bodie, the Program Manager for the African American Elders Program, and I am your MC for today. For this program, we're committed to improving accessibility. For closed captions in English, click CC. The drop-down has many languages, but today you may select Amharic, English, French, Somali, Spanish, or Swahili. But before continuing with our program, let's start by acknowledging that we're on the unceded ancestral land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, who have stewarded this land for many generations. We come with respect for this land and recognize the Duwamish people's long-standing presence throughout the territory. We honor with love and gratitude the land itself and the strength and resilience of the Duwamish people. Please join us in singing the first verse of the Black National Anthem.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise against the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Is won. Is won. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought.
That was beautiful. The program overview, our keynote speaker, LueRachelle Brim-Atkins. Then we'll have a stretch break, and then caregiver panel discussion, Pam Huggard, Teresa Gossett, Stephen LeBeau, and end-of-life planning, Stephanie Haslam. We have a packed agenda today, so we encourage you to get up and take regular stretch breaks at any time during the program. Now, we will receive opening remarks from Mary Mitchell, who is the Interim Director of Aging and Disability Services in the Seattle Human Services Department. Aging and Disability Services is a designated area agency on aging for Seattle-King County through a partnership between the City of Seattle and King County. Mary.
Thank you, Ms. Margaret. And again, I'm Mary Mitchell, the Interim Director for the Aging and Disability Services Division with the Human Services Department with the City of Seattle. and we are the area agency on aging for Seattle and King County. And among many of our responsibilities, we staff the Mayor's Council on African American Elders and Age-Friendly Seattle, and we provide caregiver support services. November is National Family Caregivers Month. Recently, Mayor Durkin and the Seattle City Council proclaimed November as Caregiver Support Month in Seattle. They recognize family caregivers as the backbone of the long-term care system in our country. Today's theme, caregiving around the clock, is so appropriate. Family caregivers make it possible for loved ones to continue to live in the home and community they already know. And whether providing direct care or planning, caregiving tasks occur all hours of the day and night. You are a caregiver if you manage appointments, medications, meals, chores, finances, respite care, or any of the many tasks required in supporting another human being. You are a caregiver even if your loved one now lives in an adult family home or skilled nursing facility. Caregiving for a loved one never ends. While there is no more important job than caring for family, we know that every caregiver lives with stress, sometimes mild, sometimes extreme. When my grandmother, Mary Hunter, could no longer care for herself, I witnessed how stressful it was for her to move from her home of 45 plus years on 20th and Main into the home of her daughter, who provided full-time care. And even with support from other family members, it was challenging for my aunt. But she never complained, and she made sure my grandmother's last days were full of love. And this makes me wonder, who cares for our caregivers? And that's why my agency provides caregiver support services. Consultations, information, and resources are available to all caregivers, regardless of income, because helping you maintain quality of life means you can help your loved ones more effectively. People who live with fewer means may be eligible for additional in-home services and supports at no charge. Services are easy to access, and I'm going to provide you with a phone number, so if you can get a pen and paper ready, and we'll also have someone put it in the chat. We coordinate and fund Community Living Connections, a free confidential information and resource service for older people, adults with disabilities, caregivers, and family members. The toll-free number is 844-348-5464. Calls are local, confidential, and free of charge, and most services are free of charge as well. When you call 844-348-5464, just say, I'm a caregiver and I'd like information about caregiver support services, and they'll take it from there. I'd like to give a shout out today to all of I'd like to give a shout out today to today's forum sponsors, to the community members who helped to plan today's forum, and to the members of ADS team who are in the virtual audience today, all whom are dedicated to health, safety, and equity for all. I look forward to today's program, and back to you, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Next, we will receive a welcome from the Mayor's Council on African American Elders, Dr. Benjamin Abe.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Benjamin Omar Abe. I'm the interim chair of the Mayor's Council on African American Elders. The MCAAE is a City of Seattle commission, and we advocate for a better quality of life for our elders in Seattle and in King County, including caregivers. We meet monthly on the third Fridays at 2 p.m. Everyone is welcome to attend. If you're interested, you can request here on the chat line, and we'll send you the information. So all is welcome. I hope everyone here today will be inspired by our program, and thank you very much for the organizers.
Thank you, Dr. Abe. Next, I'd like to recognize the forum planning team, Tony Crutchfield, Sana Jackson, Sarah Sobers Outlaw, and Karen Winston, and me. I would also like to recognize the virtual text support team assisting in the background. They are Lenny, Andrea, and Karen Winston. Thank you so much. November is National Family Caregivers Month, a time dedicated to uplifting caregivers as they care for loved ones 24/7. It is also an opportunity to increase awareness and support for caregivers who face challenges every day. This year's theme, created by the Caregiver Action Network, is Caregiving Around the Clock. As Mary stated, caregivers provide support with daily living, such as bathing and dressing, paying bills, shopping, providing transportation and emotional support, and help with managing a chronic condition or disability. They also face many challenges, including isolation, and the COVID-19 pandemic has increased responsibilities and intensified their struggles, putting many caregivers at risk of extreme stress, fatigue, and burnout. That's why we have this annual event to recognize caregivers and all that they endure. We want you to know you are not alone. We hope all caregivers joining today will feel inspired, revived, and connected with other caregivers by the end of the program. So please use the chat box to communicate with each other or for any questions to our speakers. This year, our keynote speaker is LueRachelle Brim-Atkins. Since 1988, LueRachelle has owned her organization consulting firm, Brim-Donahoe Associates, where she consults with Fortune 100 businesses, public, private, and nonprofit organizations and boards. She and her husband, Michael, had the honor of taking care of her mother and brother in their home for 4 years. When the physical burden of lifting two loved ones to and from wheelchairs became too much, they cared for them in a nearby adult family home until their death. LueRachelle.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me. I'm pleased to be with you today to talk about my relationship and my final years caring for my mother and my brother around the clock. I'd always promised myself I'd never put a loved one in a nursing home. But when my back went out, we had to start looking for a facility. I cried hysterically all day long. But let me just start with lessons that I learned, because sometimes circumstances will change the best of our intentions. Finally, we had to choose our next best option, which was an adult family home. So another lesson learned is I've always been told that God wouldn't put more on us than we could bear. But truth be told, I began to think that perhaps God shouldn't trust me quite so much. But before I talk about my time as my mother's caregiver, I want to tell you a little bit about my mother before she had a stroke and developed dementia at age 90. My mother was not always 90 years old. Here's a picture of my mom as a young woman. Mother was born in 1913. Her parents, my grandparents, were teachers. The next picture is a picture of my mom when she was around 4 or 5 years old. It's a picture of her with her mom and dad and her baby brother. A few years after this picture was taken, her parents gave birth to another son at the height of the influenza pandemic of 1919. My mother was 6 years old. When she left for school in the morning, her mother and her new baby brother were alive. When she returned from school, they had both died from the flu. My mother lived a rich and full life, but she never got over losing her mother and brother. As a result of her mother's early death, my mom was deathly afraid of getting a virus. If you sneezed around her, she'd lean away from you and give you the side eye. My brother used to tease her, saying that mother wouldn't even talk to people on the phone if they had a cold. She would not have done well in this pandemic. My mother was a public school teacher who raised her 3 children with the help of her parents after divorcing our dad. My brother William was born in 1945 in their small town in Louisiana, just as World War II ended. He had always been in poor health because a German-American doctor, a Dr. Dietz, had deliberately dropped him at birth and caused brain damage. My mother was told that she should be glad the doctors had not killed him, since he usually killed most black boy babies. My brother was lucky enough to have lived, but he suffered all his life with grand mal epilepsy, was paralyzed on his left side, and suffered with cognitive challenges. For this reason, I was the middle child, even though I functioned as the oldest child to protect my brother. So a little bit about my mom. My mom was the quintessential mother. I'll give you a few examples of the strength of my mother's character. My mother sewed underwear for a friend from a poor family who was going off to college. Mother never breathed a word about it until that friend revealed it to me 50 years later. When I asked my mom what she thought about gay people, she responded, "None of us has anything to say about how we are made. None of us. God made us all, and our only job is to love everybody." That's what my mama said. Mother loved her children fiercely and took some pretty remarkable stances to protect us, including answering a white school board member who asked whether she believed in integration. My mother responded, "We want the same things for our children that you want for your children. And if that means integration, so be it." That white man thought that was the wrong answer and saw to it that my mother's teaching contract was not renewed the next year. But mother landed on her feet in a town 50 miles away and loved that position even better than her previous one. No weapon formed against her would prosper. My mother was born during the Depression, and when she would come to visit us in Seattle and see the unpicked blackberries, she would wistfully say, "You can tell there's no depression. There are berries on the vines." My mom had lots of pithy sayings for every situation. Like a time a friend of mine asked me what she should say when she came to the hospital to see my newborn if she didn't think my baby was cute. I was horrified that she actually asked that question, and I told my mother about it. My mother said, "Every crow thinks hers is the blackest." To encourage me to be independent, mother told me every tub has to stand on its own bottom. One of the best pieces of advice she ever gave me was, "If in doubt, don't." And that has served me well when trying to make a choice. When my behavior began to collide with her values around thriftiness, mother said, "A fool and his money are soon parted." I figured out really quickly I better be saving my money. When I would wander around the house as a child saying I was bored, mother would say, "An idle mind is the devil's workshop." I'd find something to do quickly before my mother found a chore for me to do. And when I wanted to put my opinion on someone else, mother would say, "A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still." Mother always had a saying to respond to anything that was going on. Mother retired early from teaching because of progressive glaucoma. And when she began to lose her battle with glaucoma, she retired from teaching. And she and my brother William relocated to Seattle from Los Angeles to be with my younger brother Cecil and me. I developed a love of travel from my mother. And when I asked her whether she wanted to go someplace, whether it was downtown Seattle or to Asia or to Mexico, her only question was, "What day are we leaving?" And one Sunday morning at age 90, my beautiful mother had a stroke. She was lethargic when I went to help her get dressed for church. And I thought she was just sleepy. I didn't recognize the signs of a stroke. Later, I took her to the hospital and they told us the news. I still fight that guilty feeling for not knowing how to recognize a stroke. I work with that feeling, even knowing that my mom told me it wasn't my fault. But if you have elders in your life or in your care, or if you're an elder yourself, I recommend that you learn the signs of a stroke. All too late, I learned that African Americans have a higher prevalence of stroke and the highest death rate from stroke than any other racial group. And we are more likely to be disabled by a stroke. Over half of us have high blood pressure, and our high blood pressure is often more severe than others. Almost 70% of Black men and 80% of Black women are overweight, and this increases our risk of stroke. I knew all of that, but it never occurred to me that my mom would fall victim of a stroke. After Mother's stroke, she had intermittent dementia. I thought I should gently correct her when she thought she was seeing something that wasn't real. I didn't know that I should just go with the flow of whatever her imaginings were. I kept trying to keep her this side of the reality. I wish I had known better. There was so much to do when my mother had the stroke. I was so sad and afraid that this glorious mother of mine was disabled, and I kept thinking we should have been better prepared. I wish I had known about aging and disability services, and I'm so glad they do this conference now. So what did I learn? One of the things I learned was that I was so blessed to have an amazing village. I came to this town with cousins who left the city soon after I arrived, after they finished graduate school. But I had my church family, and we created a village so that our children would grow up with cousins and aunties and uncles and brothers and sisters. Our village celebrated holidays together, had potluck dinners when we were broke, which was very often. We helped raise each other's children. We even called it the village. After my husband Michael and I got married, if some silverware or tableware was missing, he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's someplace in the village." Our village served us in great stead when my mother and brother moved to Seattle. They would call them and pick them up and take them places and check on their well-being. Those reciprocal relationships were so important. And here's a lesson I learned that I pass on to you. I had to learn to ask for and to accept help. I was so grateful I had gotten myself some peeps. My faith community was important to me. I'm a member of the AME church. My people were Baptists as I had grown up, and they would be picked up by me and taken to Mount Zion for church. And then I'd run over to First AME, and then I'd run back to pick them up. But those people at Mount Zion always sat there with them until I could get there to pick them up. So I don't want you to think my mom and I didn't have some bumps in the road. I was a member of the vision and planning team that did work in Kenya in East Africa. And after Mother and William moved in with my girls and Michael and me, the vision and planning team would meet at my house so that I didn't have to get somebody to come in to be with them if Michael had to do something. So we'd meet monthly at my house. And my mother didn't like sharing me with other people. And one day the vision and planning team was coming to my house for a meeting. And I put Mother on the toilet, and I was about to get her up from the toilet. I said, "Come on, Mother, let me get you ready for bed." And she said, "I'm not getting in that bed. Go on and have your little meeting." I said, "Uh-oh, I'm in trouble now." So I tried to get off the toilet. She wouldn't move. I said, "Michael, come try to get your mom off the toilet." He tried to, no, she just would bear down and wouldn't let him move her from the toilet. So one of my friends came in and she tried, and Mother would say, "Go on and have your meeting. I know she sent you in here." One after one, they came in and tried. Finally, my friend Don Mason, who some of you remember as a legislator for Washington State, Dawn came in. She said, "Now, Mother Brim, I don't know anything about old people, My people died when I was a little girl. She said, but you need to get your ass off this toilet and let these people put you in the bed. My mother tried her best not to laugh. She just had this grimace on her face, but she loved Don Mason. So once again, my people brought me through, and mother said, okay, come on, and let me put her in the bed. So what do I know now that I wish I had known before I became a caregiver? I learned that you have to anticipate challenging people who will try to take advantage of your people. There was a man at a senior center, for example, who was hired to take pictures of the seniors. And when he took pictures of my mother and brother, he talked them into getting more pictures than they wanted, despite my mother's protestations. And when I went over to their condo after the picture taking, mother was so upset. I got on the phone, called the center, talked with the director, who immediately called the photographer's boss. Those people gave all the pictures to mother without charge, and far more pictures than we had anything to do with. And we were assured that the photographer would not be there again. Here's another thing I learned. Old folk in the South used to sing a song, everybody talking about heaven ain't going there. And just as everybody with a medical degree does not have you and your people's best interest at heart. I knew that from my brother's treatment as a newborn. But I get to Seattle, and a doctor had referred my brother to a specialist. And then she refused to tell me what the test results were. Months went by, and she finally told me, after much pressure, that she hadn't told us the test results because the doctor had had his nurse call her and had not called her himself. I was livid. I wrote a letter. I first gave that doctor a piece of my mind. Then I wrote a letter to the director of the hospital, who tried to send me a form letter. We're so sorry you had an unpleasant experience. But I wasn't having it. That was my brother, whose health she was jeopardizing with her ego, and I was not playing with her. So I wrote another letter, and finally her manager called me and said she had had a conversation with her. So I say that to you because we cannot take the word of anyone, including medical professionals, when it comes to protecting the people that we love. Another example was taxi service. Taxis would come to pick them up to take them to senior center activities, and they wouldn't even get out of the car, though my brother was disabled on a cane and my mother was blind. So we switched to Metro Access because there's some hills that I wasn't willing to die on. You have to know that you have the right and the responsibility and the ability to flex your muscles to stand up for your people. As my mom neared the end of her life, the Seattle Times did another story on us. We have a picture of me with my mom just before she passed away. And before she died, I learned about another resource, which was hospice. Mother loved classical music, and hospice supplied an artist, a harpist, who would come and play for her for hours. And I loved the fact that they would do that for her. Again, I had to stand up for my mother with one of the caregivers from hospice because they assigned a nurse to her, and I was talking to her about my mother hiding her pills under her tongue and not swallowing them. And this nurse said to me, your mother is in hospice. She doesn't have to take her medicine. I said, oh, no, she has to take her medicine because she has hallucinations, which put her out of sorts. And we get put out of sorts because we're trying to help her not have the hallucinations. So, yes, she does have to take. This woman argued with me, and I realized I didn't have to argue, as this new expression says. I didn't need to argue with someone Harriet Tubman would have shot. I had no issue reporting her to her supervisor, who said she was way out of line. So a nurse was assigned to us, a different nurse, and that nurse never found her way into our house again. Everybody else in hospice was so kind. In fact, one of the hospice people assigned to her was with my mother when she passed away. I tried to be there whenever I think my mother was fading. I'd spend the night in a chair beside her bed. Next morning, she'd get up, "Good morning, baby." But I still feel bad that I wasn't there when she died. My friend said mother knew I wasn't going to be able to take it seeing her slip away. And I guess, as Ashley Brilliant once said, she lost her will to suffer. I miss my mother, and I'm so grateful that I was able to take care of her and my brother those last years of their life. It was hard, but I'm often reminded of the words of a song that said, "For the 9 months I carried you, holding you inside me, no charge. For the nights I sat up with you, prayed for you and doctored you, no charge. For the time and the tears and the cost through the years, there is no charge. When you add it all up, the full cost of my love is no charge. For the nights filled with dread and the worries ahead, no charge. For the advice and the knowledge and the cost of your college, no charge. For the toys, food, and clothes, and for wiping your nose, there is no charge. When you add it all up, the real cost of mama's love is no charge. I'm so grateful for the support we received that made those last years of my brother's and my mother's life peaceful and rewarding. I'm grateful that I was able to provide care for them. Thank you for sharing your time with me today.
Inspiring. Thank you, LueRachelle. One thing you said that really struck me was you said, God will not put too much on us that we can bear. And I agree with that. Another thing you said, two other things. One was that, asking about gay people, that taught me something. God gave us the one thing to love everybody, and that's for anybody, to love everybody. And also to know the symptoms of a stroke, because I'm a victim myself. I had one last year. And so it helps me sometimes I can't speak. I have some aphasia myself. Thank you so much. Now we will skip questions for LueRachelle right now, but you will have an opportunity to ask her and our caregiver panel questions in our next segment. So please put your questions in the chat box. And so now we will have a quick stretch break while we prepare for the caregiver panel. Welcome back for the second half of our program. In this segment, we will hear from three panelists as they share their lived experiences as caregivers. While some were caregivers before the pandemic, we'll also learn about experiences during the pandemic. Our panel moderator is Sharon Sobers Outlaw. Sharon is a clinical social worker, community activist, and a human advocate for seniors. She received her BA in psychology and human services from Antioch University, and then attended the University of Washington and earned a master's in social work. Sharon is also a certified minority mental health consultant. She also has experience as a care manager and was also a research consultant at UW Psychology Department for 12 years. Sharon is a full-time caregiver for her mother, and the experience has springboarded her involvement in the network of aging programs and services. Sharon has a passion for cultural awareness, social justice, and she's an awesome dancer too. Sharon.
Thank you, Margaret. We will now hear from the panel of caregivers. We call this segment Loving from the Front Line. Our panelists are Teresa Gossett, Pam Hubbard, and Stephen LeBeau. I want to just say quickly, they will tell you the diagnosis of each of their loved ones they're caring from. Teresa?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa Gossett, and I was the caregiver for my mother, Johnny Kelly, from 2010 to 2018 when she passed away in December. I became her caregiver because her husband passed away in 2010. She said, I'm gonna marry a young man so he can take care of me. And he ended up dying before she did. But anyway, she was one that was always scary type. She never would live alone. She didn't even like being alone one night by herself. I would always have to come spend the night if her husband had some overnight event or traveling. She was diagnosed with behaviors associated with Alzheimer's, chronic kidney disease, and hypertension. So her dementia was really increased slowly, I would say, because people would always tell me their loved ones would kind of get mean sometimes. But she was always a loving, kind, and compassionate person, very maternal, loving, and she just never really exhibited any challenges that made it even harder for me to deal with. She was, after my stepfather's death in 2010, I had the smaller home, 2 bedrooms. So my mother had a 4-bedroom. So I decided to upgrade my family and move into her home with her. But I also had to bring my family, which I was taking care of 2 babies, one 13 months by one daughter and one 2 years old by the other. So they came along with me, and I also let one of my grandkids' father stay with me because he was living with me until he could find a job. And then after 3 years, 1 year actually, one of my daughters moved back home because she lost her apartment. So we kind of had an extended generational family situation going on, and my mother it was like a lifeline, those grandbabies, because she really played with them. It was like her total focus was, oh, where is King? Where is boy? And she would play with them. They would kiss her and hug her, and she would tell them little poem stories that she still remembered. One thing about my mom, she never, even to the end, she remembered her social security number. Believe that. And she also knew her address. But after toward the last couple of years, she started getting up at 3 a.m, going to get fully dressed, even though she might have her sweater on as a skirt. She would get fully dressed with her fur coat, put her lipstick on, her shoes on the wrong side, and then knock on my door across the hall, 3 o'clock in the morning, talking about, I'm ready to go. And I said, where you going? She said, I've got a date with Bill Clinton. So she would always do humorous stuff like that. She was just amazing with her jokes. And she would get up sometime and just say, I'm not at home. I want to go home. I said, well, what's your address? And she said 2522, which was her address. But she was talking about back in her childhood house, which was in Tyler, Texas. That's where she was from. And she was I think that was a lot of the most I've ever challenged was I dealt with challenges just dealing with all my family at one time and being a caregiver for the babies too. Because, these young kids, they don't want to help out the mamas and the daddies, and everybody got kind of lazy. But I reached out, and I was fortunate. I'm a researcher. I got into a support group that helped me tremendously, Sound Generations. And I heard other people's stories about loved ones they were taking care of. And just like the caregiver before me spoke of, I can relate to everything she was talking about. But there's always, even under trying situations, you can make it. You can find a way to take care of your loved ones at home. And I found a way, and my mother was able to be in a familiar environment, her home, and we adjusted to living with her so she could have her home and be familiar and be happy the last 10 years of her life. She was 94 when she passed, and I really believe that those grandkids were what kept her alive so long, because her doctors were giving her 2 years. And every time I took her to the doctor about the kidney, oh, they reversed, they would be up, and she never did have to go on dialysis. But that's why I want to emphasize love, compassion is very important, and patience. You got to have patience. And that's why you got to self-love yourself. You got to take care of yourself. You got to get rest. You got to build your village. You got to build your team. You got to ask for help, because it's no joke. It's not easy taking care of one, especially when they get closer to the end. And then you got to know who to call for more help, which I called hospice, and they take care of your loved ones from home. So you don't have to worry about all of that, because it really gets difficult toward the end. In fact, I kind of messed up my body, because I would lift my mom from the floor, and it was dead weight. You know how that is. And so by it being dead weight, now I got to have surgery next week on my hip. I'm going to get a total hip replacement. That's why I emphasize so much to take care of yourself so you can take care of them. And I just called in friends and found out about even volunteers, because, everybody got something going on and got to live and work. I quit my job in 2016 so I could really take care of my mother well. And I did. I took care of her so well. She lived 8 extra years after after the doctor said she wouldn't live. And then
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Teresa. Go ahead, Teresa. It's just time for.
I was just gonna tell you tips to remember that really helped me like bullets.
Okay.
Take care of self, ask family and friends for help, respite time for yourself, and exhibit patient kindness and compassion, and use your outside sources that we spoke about earlier. We're going to have them on the website, and try to go to some conferences, because you learn so much, caregiving conferences, once we get out of this pandemic. But things like this, you learn a lot, and just feel free to ask any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. So Pam Hubbard.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes,
Okay,
please.
great. Thanks, Sharon. And
I can hear you.
And Teresa, I can certainly relate. The doctors gave my mother 6 months, and she lived almost 4 years longer than they had given her prognosis. On September 30th, 2019, my daughter and I sat opposite sides of my mother's bed. We held her hand and we sang hymns. We told her how much we loved her. We assured her that we would be all right, and we gave her permission to go. She took her last breath and went home to the Lord. It was truly a blessing to usher my mother's passing and to fulfill the promise not to let her die alone in a nursing home. However, when I made that promise, I had absolutely no idea and didn't give much thought to what it would take, how I would do it, and how it would impact my life physically, emotionally, financially, and even spiritually. It was just important to me to honor Miss Viola. That's my pet name for my mama, Miss Viola. She was a beautician for 54 years, and all of my friends and the young people who were her customers called her Miss Vi or Miss Viola. My family is extremely small. It was just my mom, my daughter, and myself. And my daughter lives in California. In late 2016, the doctor told me, not my mom, that she probably would have only 6 months to live. My mom was 91 then, and I was devastated, heartbroken, lost, and the whole idea just terrorized me. My mom was diagnosed with fourth stage kidney failure and fourth stage congestive heart failure. These are competing conditions when it comes to balancing the fluid levels and treatment. So for the first couple of years, there were a lot of doctor's appointments, multiple 911 calls, long late night emergency room visits, and several extended hospital stays. During that time, my mom wasn't bedridden for the first couple years or so, yet she used a walker. She really didn't have the strength to do much of anything for herself. I did just about everything for her. I helped her bathe and dress and did all her chores and her meals. Plus, my mother loved to play some bingo. So I made sure that she got out once a week to the senior citizens so that she could have some type of social life. But I became her everything, and her life slowly and completely, totally consumed mine, by caring for her. It was extremely hard, very isolating, and really it really challenged my mental and health and peace of mind. Caregiving for me became a two-edged sword. I loved being there for my mom and knowing that she was being well cared for. But to be honest, there were days I felt so resentful and frustrated, which in turn made me feel guilty and a bad daughter. My mom didn't have dementia, for the first couple of years or so. And actually, she was in her right mind until the end, except for a few very interesting sundowner nightly episodes. We're a family of strong-willed women. So there were days when I would say under my breath, and when she would get on my last nerve, Shady Pines is looking pretty good today. But but so not to hurt my mom's feelings, I held all those feelings in. And in doing so, they grew into extreme stress and some depression. And I was totally, totally exhausted and isolated. Plus, I was so terrified every day that was beyond the 6 months prognosis, I couldn't sleep. And my mom was often active at night, and I had to climb 17 stairs whenever I had to check on her. So I mounted a camera in her bedroom so that I could check on her. And that camera also allowed my daughter, who lived in California, to check on her too. And a side note, if I did leave with caretakers, I could also watch what was going on. I finally reached out for help when my mom began to spend most of her time either sitting or in bed. Plus, I was in a lot of pain because I had hurt my back and shoulders, not knowing how to properly care for a weak or bedridden person. I found out that my mom, was eligible for COPS or COPS, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. At first, my mom received a caretaker for 2 days per week, 4 hours to 6 hours per day. But respite for me was not part of those services. But when the caretakers would come, I used that time to sleep. The caregiver's hours were increased as her condition got worse and Miss Viola became bedridden. During the last part of 2018, our doctor, my mom and I had the same doctor. Our doctor was concerned for my health. So she suggested that my mom go into hospice because she could receive a lot more services and medical care at home. She could be on hospice for up to 2 years and come out or go back whenever she chose to. So I welcomed that because I was on the verge of a physical and mental breakdown. That was also the time that I found Tony Crutchfield and the Sound Generations Caregivers group. They absolutely saved my life. And they put things in proper perspective. They understood and allowed me to say and feel whatever I needed to say without judgment. They gave me permission to be angry and frustrated, along with along with the love and commitment I had from my mother. They let me cry out loud. They let me cry and laugh out loud. I'm getting choked up. They shared their experiences with me, and I didn't feel alone. They gave me tools and training to help me communicate my needs, set boundaries, and find resources. They enhanced the quality of my life and the caretaking I was providing for my mother, and so much more. Although I had a couple of short-lived caretaker nightmares, the Lord sent us Felicia. Felicia was my mother's caretaker for about a year. She also happened to be a member of my mother's church. She treated my mother like a queen until the end. She came 4 to 6 days, 6 to 8 hours per day. And my mom also had other conscientious caregivers than when Felicia was off. Mom's hospice staff was also incredible and very attentive to my mom's every need. Having all these folks and resources in place, I was able to regain my physical, emotional, and mental health. All her life, Miss Fowler was healthy, voraciously, and fearlessly independent Christian woman who loved to play bingo. The only thing she has always been afraid of was living and dying alone in a nursing home. On September 30th, we were all together at peace and in love. To summarize the lessons I learned and what I hope you take away is, it is critical to take care of yourself. Learn how to set appropriate boundaries. When asking folks for prayer, also ask them for help. Get support and educate yourself on all the available resources and get support from there also. Caretaking is not a one-person job.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you so much. Okay, we now have Stephen LeBeau. And Stephen, could you please share at this time?
Yes, thank you, Sharon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephen LeBeau. I'm the caregiver for my wife, Joyce. Joyce was diagnosed with Alzheimer's about 6 years ago. 2 years prior to her diagnosis, my kids and I, we started noticing Joyce was having difficulty doing everyday tasks. Driving became very problematic for her. She was having a hard time finding objects in the pantry and in the refrigerator. Her eyes were playing tricks on her. Cooking meals became difficult. Placing a pot or a pan on the stove, she would quite often not be able to get it on the eye correctly, and she was burning handles to the pots. At this time, we took her to a neurologist, and she took a cognitive dementia test, and it was inconclusive at the time. But as you may know, Alzheimer's is something that progresses over time. And so her conditions started getting worse. her visibilities really started becoming a problem for her. She was unable to read, and writing became very difficult. She couldn't write on a straight line. At first, we thought it was arthritis, but it turned out to be it was a function of the Alzheimer's. We She took another test, cognitive dementia test, and at this time it was discovered that she did have Alzheimer's. Joyce, her behavior started to be a little bit of a problem. She was irritable all the time. She started hiding things. I don't, we would find money hidden in her in different odd places around the house. She would lose her or hide her keys or wallet, and when we would find them, she would accuse us of putting them there, which was kind of odd, but eventually, we got her on different medications that seemed to help with her anxiety and her behavior. Now Joyce, she's at the state now where it's more advanced, and she will spend 18, 19 hours a day sleeping. So the battle with her now is getting her to do different things. I mean, all she wants to do is sleep. So taking her to an appointment or getting her up and about, it can be pretty frustrating. She she tends to resist in any change. So, but she needs help in doing most things. Getting dressed. We have to feed her and help her. Go to the bathroom and those type of things. So, but one thing that I've learned is, which was tough for me, I have to have patience. I have to be real patient with her. She can kind of sense if you're anger or frustration in your voice, and she will react to that. So I have to always be pleasant with her. And normally, if I give her time, I can come back and ask her to do something, and she quickly forgets, and she will, maybe do it. You just have to keep pestering her and give her time, and normally she will relax and do what you need her to do. Joyce, I do have help. I have my kids that help me when they can, but I do have professional help. I'm fortunate enough I can afford to have someone come in 5-6 hours a day, and that allows me time to get the respite and also get out and do things that I need to do, either around the house or go to appointments or whatever, which is a huge help. Uh, that's let's see. Oh, one thing that Joyce, she doesn't enjoy television as much as she used to. She has trouble following the plot in movies and such, but she does enjoy music. She sometimes will put music on for her, and she'll get up and dance. We had a fish fry at our church one time, and we were all outside on the church grounds, and we had one of the church members had his DJ equipment set up, and everyone was just amazed when the music started playing, and the songs that she liked, she got up and just started dancing, and so she still enjoys her music. But one of the lessons that I've learned is, you will make mistakes. We're all human, and you just have to be patient, and extreme amount of patience is a big help, and you do need as much help as you can get. I'm fortunate that all three of our kids are live locally, so I can always count on them. I have a grandson that's a teenager now, and he's old enough to help out as well. So that's been a big help.
This has been so much, you guys sharing your caregiver journey with us. And it's so powerful. You don't know how powerful everything that you said resonates with someone in the room, I know. So at this time, we would like to have questions for our panelists, and LueRachelle will join.
Lou, I just want to tell you I was doing okay until you sang that song. It's so emotional.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. And thank you to our panelists. Thank you for sharing your journeys. Sharon, we do have a question in the chat box. The first one is, and I'll just put it out there, and Sharon, you can direct who should answer.
Okay.
First question is, how do I get extra help and assistance for my mom who is extremely resistant to outside help?
Oh, LueRachelle, do you want to answer that one?
I can talk about my experience with my mom because everybody is different, but my mom was resistant to other people coming in because she wanted me to be there 24/7. And so that was difficult. She ran a few caregivers away. One, I was out of town, and one called my friend and told her, "You come over here with this woman now." And my friend jumped in her car and came to help my mother. And she said that the caregiver was standing by the door with her coat on. So, my mother was a sweet person, but dementia can make you behave in ways that are not who you are. But I just had to put my foot down and say, "Mother, I just can't do it all by myself. I just can't." And if had it not been for Michael, I would have had to put them in an adult family home a lot sooner. So for those of you who are doing this alone, I bow to you, because I would not have been able to do it. He lifted them, he cooked for them, he laughed and talked with them, he watched TV with them. So things that when I was at my ropes end, like Pam was saying, she often felt, he would step in that gap. So I would just say the best I can offer you is put your foot down and get the help, even if they resist, because otherwise somebody's going to be calling a caregiver for you.
Okay, Karen, do you have another question for us?
Yes, we have a question and a comment.
Someone might have a better answer than mine. I mean,
Oh,
that's
I
just my
think you're right.
experience.
It's important that you learn how, in love and patience, how to set boundaries with the person you're caring for, so that you can access the additional help.
Is there anyone else that wants to comment? Okay, Karen, can you go with that next comment and question?
okay. Thank you. There was a comment. You have to be taught how to use tools to lift loved ones properly.
Oh God, yes.
Oh,
Learned
yes.
learned much from my two aunts on how to move, lift, and be there in other ways for my mom. It was rough because it was my first time, and there was a lot I wish I knew. That was the comment. The next question is it okay to let them sleep for 14 to 17 hours a day? And should I try to wake her up?
Stephen, you would seem like the appropriate person to ask this since you're dealing with that.
Yes, yes. Well, I in talking to my wife's primary care doctor and also the neurologist, they they advised me to try to get Joyce engaged in something that she enjoys doing, uh, and to keep her from sleeping so much. And I try to do that, and when the weather is nice, getting her outside. My grandson, he's involved with various sports, and I would try to get her out and to whatever sport he's playing, and that seemed to work pretty good. There's not a lot of things that she enjoys doing, but she does enjoy, my experience, Joyce enjoys music, but sometimes she'll just nod off on the music too, so it is a challenge. I have to admit, to try to keep her entertained, because there are fewer things that she enjoys doing. But I mean, all you can do is try to get them, find what interest that they have and try to get them engaged in that interest. And maybe that will prevent them from sleeping too much.
Is there anyone else that would like to comment on that at this time?
Okay, yeah, I agree with Stephen. My mother used to sleep 14 to 16 hours sometimes, and what I would wake her up because I didn't want her to just be bedridden when she didn't really have to be. She was still able to walk with a walker and pretty mobile. But I always woke her up. Hey, Mom, wake up. We're going to the lake or the beach today, or we're going over to somebody's house that she really enjoyed. And so we would go out a lot. My mother was always ready to go. I would say sometimes I would just let her sleep because, nothing hurts sleep. They need a lot of rest. But whenever you can, try to get them engaged by waking them up and get, doing something that they enjoy doing. Everybody's different.
I think it's important just to keep them engaged, period, if they're sleeping a lot or not. I
Yes.
think that's something that's incredibly important.
Yes, very important. Karen, is there any more questions at this time?
Yes, there
Okay.
are a
Okay.
couple more.
Okay.
Next one is, who do you recommend to come into the home for 5 to 6 hours a day?
Let's see. Teresa, would you like to talk about that or?
Okay. Yeah. They have agencies, a lot of them, and they list them, a lot of them through the city of Seattle, or either whatever King County community you live in, or you can just contact Aging and Disability Services and they'll refer you to some. I had Evergreen, which was, they had caregivers that worked for them. And I did go through a few caregivers myself. Some of them were burying their babies. And I said, how can you take care of my mom when you take care of the baby? So I would, recommend that you just kind of vet them and let the agencies know exactly what you need.
Yeah.
Light housekeeping, bathing, light cooking, and serving meals.
And be aware that you're going to have to go through a few of them
Yes,
before you get a good match. So
that's right.
just prepare yourself for that.
Okay. Is there anybody else that'd like to comment on it?
Yeah,
Cheryl, would
I
you
just
like
want to point out that
Okay.
Andrea added the phone number to Community Living Connections in the chat box, and that number represents the front door to the whole network of aging programs and services. So that's an important number to know. So please write that down. The next question, my mother is 80 years old, and I would like to know, how should I prepare her for moving back to Seattle? She has had multiple mini strokes in the last 5 years.
LueRachelle, I think you moved.
Yeah, I had that experience. Actually, my mom moved before. My mom moved because she was losing her sight. But I think my my advice to you, Kimberly, is to plan for the most strenuous circumstances, even though your mother is not there yet. So thinking about the place where she will live and how she can make that most comfortable and how welcome she is. Start to think of how you can introduce her to people in Seattle, so that, and some of them younger than she needs age mates, but she also needs some young people who will have some energy to do some things with her. My mom had young friends at Mount Zion who would come and see her, and she loved them and they loved her. So just setting it up almost like a nest that will make her the most comfortable she can possibly be in Seattle, but plan for things that she doesn't need now. And this list of resources that the staff is giving you today, I think is going to help a lot. Had I had those phone numbers, my life would have been a lot easier because I thought start from scratch. And I don't know if they were in existence then, but had they been, I would have called every one of those numbers that's in the chat and let them tell me exactly what to do.
Yes.
Okay. So Karen, do you have one more question for us?
Yes. The next question is, what can be done when the work on the house person giving care is a stroke victim and believes that he can do repairs in the house instead of demolishing the house?
Instead, is demolishing the house.
Yes, thank you.
I don't know who to pose this question to. Would somebody volunteer?
So is the idea that the person is destroying the house thinking that he's repairing it? Is that what the question is?
That's what it sounded like, yeah.
I mean, I didn't have to deal with dementia or maybe my own, but or Alzheimer's. But I know there are a couple of really incredible agencies that provide training. I think one's Momenta or something like that.
Dementia.
But there are agencies that are specifically there to train and help you in helping with caring for your family members with dementia or maybe I should go.
Okay, so is there any
I can't remember that.
more questions at this time? Or anybody has any more comments in regards to that last question?
Yes, there is. Oh, I'm sorry. There's
ahead,
another
Karen.
question. And this question is, where can I get assistance with managing my mother's medications?
Oh, yeah. You know, there are some pharmacies and that will put your meds in a tray and deliver them to you in the tray. Now, don't ask me the name of them. I'm sure Karen and the people on the staff can lead you to that. But that was a lifesaver because they're all done by days of the week and they're all packaged and they send them to your house and all you have to do is open them that way. So
Anybody
Yes,
else?
I would like to add to that. It's called Medipacks and most
that's it.
That's it.
yeah, most pharmacies do it upon request and they deliver and everything. So you
Yeah.
know, worry about I did my mother's medicine and it was time consuming. She was on a lot of pills, but I would highly recommend Medipack. And you can call your insurance company and they'll give you the name of participating pharmacies that do that. Most of the major ones do it.
I think mine was Mediset.
Okay.
And
yeah, they got
were,
different, they pretty much do the same thing.
yeah.
Steve, did you have anything to say about medications?
No, I kind of do my wife's medications, and I've been able to handle it pretty much on my own. I did hear about the Medi pack that you were talking about, but I've just done it on my own, and so far it's worked out okay. Her neurologist sometimes is always making adjustments depending on how Joyce is reacting to them. So, I don't want to get too far in advance and pre-prepared medication because of these adjustments. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Steve, because the change that happens is depends on what's going on at the time because it changes so much. So you can't give the same thing all the time.
all the time.
That's a very good point. Very good point. Karen, do you have another question?
That was our final question. There is a comment, however.
Okay.
It says a community resource, or excuse me, hello, my name is Lily, and she's is viewing us from Sumter, South Carolina.
Wow.
And she wanted
Okay.
to say that I'd like to say I really enjoy this panel, and I really appreciate the experiences that you mentioned. Um, and then another comment, a community resource that I've been developing for community members, can be found, and he listed the website in the chat.
Okay. Well, I have to tell you, I really appreciate everything that everyone has said. And me being a caregiver, I have to tell you, I've always learned something from someone else. And most I've had the experience of, no sleeping. I wish my mom would sleep sometimes. That's that's the thing. And that you guys talk about the sleeping piece. The medication, I thought that was a great thing to talk about. And one of the other things that, is talking about the different diagnoses. There's 181 different forms of dementia. Most people don't know that. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. And so everybody throws everything in one block. So it's really important for you to find out what the diagnosis is. My mother has vascular dementia, which is a product from her being diabetic, and uncontrolled diabetes. So guys have mentioned the different things about the stroke, about the kidney, about the heart, just all those things are so important. And I think you have done such a wonderful job today. And I know that people today will walk away with more questions and we will have something available. I just want to let everyone know that please go to the website and leave, if you have questions that you just came to you after the segment that you want to ask of the panelists or of Aging and Disability, put all your questions on the website and we will get back to you. And remember, no question is a stupid question. All questions are really, good questions to ask. That's one of the things as a caregiver that I always thought. I mean, me and Pam kind of supported each other through our caregiving, and we had our moments. And it was really nice to have somebody else that felt the same way I felt, and to know that we have these feelings. So remember that in your questions. Ask any question. There's no rank, and don't feel any shame because you are human. Okay?
Sure, there are more comments in the chat if you want me to read them.
Yes, why don't you? Yes.
Okay. Let's see, we have a comment from Gary Fountain. I was a caregiver to both my parents, dad with Alzheimer's and mom with colon cancer. Then my longtime partner had fourth stage lung cancer. I cared for 3 adults full time. When they all passed, I was emotionally overwhelmed. I moved to Seattle and now help other caregivers deal with their needs as caregiver outreach coordinator for Gen Pride Seattle.
Yay.
Oh, that's great. Well, how is Gary doing now? His self-care. Hope he took care of himself. Another thing that the panelists brought up was talking about cameras, talking about having cameras in the home. I think that's a real vital thing. Pam, do you want to mention more about the camera? What kind of camera and where you can get it?
Having a camera was sort of a lifesaver for me, or at least an energy saver, because my mom was 17 steps away from me, staircase 17 steps. And I found myself in the middle of the night often having to run up those steps just to check on her if I heard anything or felt like that she needed something. So another friend of mine who was providing care, given for her parents, said, why don't you get a camera and mount that in her room, and then you can watch her from wherever you are. And I thought they would be expensive, but just a couple of them were like $80. And They were a lifesaver. I could, if I heard something or felt like I needed to just check on her, I could just look on my cell phone and look at her. If I had left the house and there was someone here, I could monitor what was going on. And my daughter, who lived in California, could monitor or watch her grandma whenever she wanted to. And she could also sit in on doctor's appointments that occurred at the house. So they're called, I think there is ZMODO, Demodo cameras, and they're available on Amazon. And you just simply put an app on your phone and you can monitor whomever. Um, and it has a two-way audio, so it's not a great audio, but at least my daughter could listen in or um, on doctor visits. So that was a lifesaver for me, and I felt it made me feel a lot more comfortable
Oh, there they are.
when I left my mom with someone else.
Okay, well, at this time, we're concluding this section of the panelists, and I can't tell you guys have done a tremendous job as always. It's more than there's no words to describe what you've shared with us. It's so powerful and helpful to all of us. So, Margaret?
Okay.
Hey.
Thank you, Sharon, and many more thanks to our panelists
Fine.
and LueRachelle. In our final segment here, we'll hear from Stephanie Haslam, who will talk to us about end-of-life planning. Stephanie Haslam is a Seattle attorney and the owner of Compassionate Legal Care. Her practice focuses on elder law, estate planning, guardianship, power of attorney, and wills. Stephanie?
Well, hello, I'm Stephanie Haslam. I'm delighted to be here again at the Caregiver Conference for African American seniors. My intention today was to share some pieces of information that might help you to put the whole piece together of trying to provide quality care for your loved ones. And while I'm an attorney, I also have a perspective as an occupational therapist, having worked in home health and in hospice and in skilled nursing facilities prior to going to law school. I've been working with seniors for 40 years. I'm almost a senior myself now. So my next birthday, I'll be 60. So one common question that I answer for clients as they come in, or for caregivers for seniors when they come in to see me, are, how are we going to pay for my loved one's care? And then how are we going to make sure the care is good quality? What can we do to do those things? And so I try to help a person analyze those questions from several perspectives. While I'm an attorney, we have a legal perspective. I'm sorry, we should be moving the slides. I apologize. Could you please click on and then keep moving? And the next slide. So the different parts of the analysis I can do with a client is looking at the legal aspects. Do they have the documents in place that they need? And that's a big part of it. But also looking at the financial part of it, and what resources are available to pay for care and to support the needs of your loved ones and yourself. And then also some medical issues to look at, or medical resources to look at to help you and your loved one. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So the legal documents that we work often with and that would be beneficial to the seniors in your life are power of attorney documents. So the most common one people hear about are the financial powers of attorney. And those are giving permission to somebody to manage your financial affairs. Whether if it's a situation where you want it for convenience, they can help you right away. Or if it's a situation where you only want people involved if you're incapacitated, then the authority for your people to act on your behalf is held off until proof of incapacity is provided. Now, when I work with clients, I may have a senior who's very capable and driving and able to manage their own affairs. And they may be a little reluctant about having a power of attorney for themselves, giving someone authority. I hear that a lot. Am I giving up control? What am I doing here? And I encourage people to think, if the push comes to shove and things are going badly, who would you want to step up for you? Who can you count on for that? And then to put it in place ahead of time. Because if you wait too late and you can't sign papers, you may not have that option of putting in place the information and the instructions you want and the authority to act. So as I mentioned, the document can become effective immediately, or it can become effective only upon incapacity. What I often recommend is that have it effective immediately. That doesn't mean the people you name have to step in right away. That means they're available right away, and you can tell them when to step in, or if an emergency triggers it, then they can step in. Otherwise, the alternative of being contingent, as I mentioned in the effectiveness part, contingent on incapacity, sometimes a person has to be pretty far down that incapacity slope before a physician's comfortable enough to write a letter that'll trigger the power of attorney. So don't automatically assume we should just have it only if I'm incapacitated. What else to say about the healthcare financial power of attorney? I imagine there'll be some questions about it. So can we go on to the next slide, please? Another power of attorney is for health decisions. And when you're appointing somebody to make health decisions for you, they're only allowed to make the decisions for you if you cannot speak for yourself. If you can speak for yourself, the care providers or the physicians will ask you first what your preferences are. So in regard to the healthcare documents, the healthcare power of attorney is where you're saying who can make decisions for you if you can't do it for yourself. But it's also beneficial because the document also gives the authority. It tells your agent what can they do for you. Can they consent to medications? Can they consent to surgeries? Can they consent to home care providers? And then oftentimes with the power of attorney for health care, or in my case, inside my power of attorney for health care, are end of life or advanced dementia instructions. So the power of attorney is where you're giving authority for someone to act for you and you're naming them and what they can do. The Healthcare Advance Directive or Living Will is specifically about end of life instructions. Sometimes a client, when I discuss this with them, we talk about CPR and we talk about tube feeding and hydration if a person can't swallow for themselves any longer. And I assure the client that this aspect, this Healthcare Advance Directive or Living Will, is triggered when two doctors say that it looks like it's an end-of-life situation. So it's not an excuse for anybody to withhold care or support to an elder. It's the elder saying, this is when you let me have peace. And the elder can say what kind of care they want for end of life. Do they want tube feeding hydration provided or withheld? What about antibiotics? Withholding antibiotics if a person's in a situation where they're passing away, and it can be a quicker way to pass naturally and sometimes comfortably. What other things? Could be also in the advanced directive, you can indicate, as I mentioned, CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Now, there's sometimes some concerns about that. A client will say, well, in my advanced directive, I'm scared to put don't do CPR. What if I'm at home and the paramedics come running in and they won't do CPR? And I assure them, again, this aspect of the document, the living will, is only when you're at the end of life and it's been triggered by two physicians. So the CPR will happen at home. It'll happen at the hospital if you're in the hallway. It'll happen if you're at the grocery store. It's just when you're at the end of life, then there's specific instructions. Could I have the next slide, please? Next slide. Hello, Lenny, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and talk. My next slide. Another document is called a Mental Health Advance Directive. Oh, there we go. Sorry. A Mental Health Advance Directive is in a unique circumstance, it's unusual, but it can happen. If a senior has maybe is frailer and maybe has acquired a urinary tract infection, and also at the same time is maybe dehydrated, the the perfect storm of those conditions can sometimes cause a delirium or temporary mental break. And so in the event that happens, a client can ahead of time say, if that did happen to me, here's who I trust to make decisions for me. And I give them permission. And I give them permission to allow for medications. And I give them permission to voluntarily keep me in the hospital for up to 2 weeks. The way the law is in Washington right now is if a person has a delirium, like my friend Alpha had that, she was dehydrated, she had a urinary tract infection, she was a registered nurse, and she was in her late 80s, my dear friend. And I was visiting her, and I could tell she was really sick. She would not let me take her to the hospital. And I was terrified she was going to die in the night. I woke up every couple hours to check on her. And in the morning, she wasn't responding. And so I took this time, I'm going to take her to the hospital. I took her to the hospital, and the emergency staff came and put her in a wheelchair and took her in. I went and parked the car. And when I walked into the emergency entrance, she'd got her wherewithal about her and was wheeling herself out again. She was going to go home. And I was terrified that she would die. And so thankfully she still trusted me, even though she had some delusions from her dehydration. She trusted me enough to go back into the hospital and get treatment. And then she was able to get better and return home and lived there for another couple of years. So that led me to believe I need something in advance, some documentation for my clients so they can say who can make decisions for them if this did happen. And so it's a really important document. I don't think it's especially common at this point, but just keep it in the back of your mind. And if you do have an attorney you're working with, ask them if they could do that. I'm happy to share it with your attorneys. And so have them contact me. I'll be happy to share it. Could I have the next slide, please? Another document that is sometimes provided in Washington State is called the POLST form. POLST stands for Physician's Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. It's a doctor's order. It's like a prescription for a medication, or an order for an x-ray, or an order for therapy. And it's a physician's order that the physician and the patient, the senior, go through together. They determine, if there's an emergency situation and the paramedics come in, what kind of care do you want? Now, most of the population, the default is I want full care, get me to the hospital, determine what's going on, and then we can make decisions if end of life or anything needs to be withheld. But for somebody who maybe has advanced, some advancing medical problems or dementia or chronic illness, they may be concerned about having the CPR, the cardiopulmonary resuscitation. When you think about the show ER and people coming at you and they're pounding on the heart and they have the paddles, with a frail or older adult, that can break somebody's ribs. And so in consultation with the doctor, the patient and the doctor determine, do I want to have that happen to me if my heart does stop? Or should that be the time that I pass? And so this POLST form, this lime green form, is something that, again, can be filled out with the doctor, but I suggest that you not use it unless you're serious about withholding treatment. Paramedics are trained to come, and if they see this lime green form, that's usually kept on the refrigerator, on the wall, somewhere visible. When they see this lime green form, they say, whoop, whoop, but let's take a look at this. And so they hesitate and to look at what the instructions are. And sometimes it might be a bit confusing. So just be sure that, what you want in this form and that is in the form. And I would not use the form if you're wanting full treatment. Can we go to the next slide, please? Another legal document that a person can do ahead of time to plan is a will. And I'm also going to touch on trust, even though I don't have a slide for trust. But Victoria, I saw, had asked a question about trusts. So regarding wills, in Washington State, we don't do trusts as often we don't have the same cost of doing settling an estate as they do in other states like California or New York. And so trusts aren't as commonly used. But wills are. Wills are easier because wills are flexible. Wills can be changed easily. Wills can be updated. When a person does a trust, a living trust, it's like creating a fake person. And then you have to transfer your assets to the fake person. And so that takes money and time to transfer assets out of your name into a trust in order to pass on assets to your loved ones. Whereas with a will, you don't have to change the title of your assets. However, inside your will, you can put a trust, and it's powerful. This trust can be put in place inside the will. You don't worry about it while you're living. When you pass away, anybody in your life that you name, if the person has a disability, their share can go into the trust inside the will and be protected so that the person with disabilities can receive their Medicaid benefits or receive veterans benefits and not lose benefits because they all of a sudden have resources. So the will with testamentary trust can be a protection for your disabled beneficiaries. It can also be a protection for a beneficiary who's underage, maybe a grandchild who would inherit. You can also put it in there for maybe you got your kid you've got a golden heart, but they're terrible with money and you want to protect them because maybe they're going through bankruptcies. So there's a lot of tools you can put inside a will, and versus the trust, the will is more flexible and you can switch as much as you like. Oftentimes with couples, like as Mr. LeBou and his wife's situation, we would look to the couples and we would perhaps maybe put a trust inside the will for the surviving spouse, for a spouse that maybe has disabilities. And then when the surviving spouse with disabilities is living and has the benefit of the trust, when the surviving spouse with disabilities passes away, the trust assets are distributed according to the will of that spouse that left it, the deceased spouse. So there's a lot of control you can have over the assets with a will that happens after you die without a lot of fuss up front. Could I please have the next slide? So that was a large part of the legal piece of the puzzle for trying to put in place resources and the support you need for your loved ones. One thing I really want to point out, and I did forget, is when a married couple has legal documents, there's a presumption that a married couple can sign for each other because they have assets together, and that's not true. And so I encourage married couples to consider making sure they have the documents in place so they can act for each other. Even though they're married, there are limitations to what they can sign for each other. If that occurred and there's something that has to be signed and the spouse with disabilities or incapacity can no longer sign, sometimes it ends up in a court case and ends up as a guardianship, and which is costly. The court is involved. It's public. It's just something you want to avoid. So just something, plan ahead, put these things in place, your legal documents. Another piece of this puzzle is the financial piece. How do we bring resources in to help pay for care? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. Could we have the next slide, please? So some veterans are eligible, or their surviving spouses can be eligible for veterans benefits. It's limited by income and resources. So there aren't a whole lot of veterans that'll be eligible for it, but it's worth looking into. It can provide support, supplemental income to the veteran to help pay for care. Can we have the next slide, please? Another source of paying for care is the Medicaid program, which is a traditional program. Nationwide, it has covered people who have limited resource and limited income will provide for nursing home care. What a person does is they have to have their resources spent down fairly significantly, as the numbers show, and then apply for assistance. Then the person who needs the nursing home care, we have to use that person's income to pay for the care, and then Medicaid will supplement the difference. Now, when there's a married couple, sometimes some of the income of the nursing home spouse, the Medicaid spouse, can be kept for the spouses in the community in order for this community spouse to be able to pay the bills too. So that's something to always try to advocate for. If a couple is applying for Medicaid, make sure that the community spouse is showing all the bills. Maybe there are some unusual things that are being paid for and can offset some of the payment that has to be for the nursing home care. Also, in order to qualify for nursing home care, there has to be the physical need, the functional need, which means you need assistance with several daily activities of daily living. It could be assistance with feeding, assistance with toileting or bathing, or getting dressed, or transferring. And then the financial test. Most people pass the financial income test. As you can see, it's a pretty high income, close to 8,000. But the resources is where people run into problems. A single person can only have $2,000 worth of countable resources, and a married couple can have about 132,000 of countable resources for nursing home. Now, that's oftentimes people are under the impression that they have to go spend it down, and they have to go, they can't apply for assistance until that money's gone and spent on care. There are some ways to strategically, if you're over that limit, there are ways strategically to spend down that won't be just flowing out of your pocket. It could be something like making improvements to a home that you live in if you own it. It could be purchasing a special piece of equipment or a new vehicle. It could be gifting if you have a disabled child, or it could be transferring a home to a child who lived with you and helped you stay in the community. Those are some examples, and there's a lot more. So there's no one, it's not a hard and fast rule that if you have 150,000 and you're a married couple that you don't qualify to get to 130,000. There can be tools to spend you down, but yet conserve resources. We're changing the nature from countable resources to exempt resources. Can we go to the next slide, please? How am I doing for time? Next one. Okay, COPES. The COPES program is more of a Washington animal. It is another Medicaid program, but in Washington, I'm very proud to say we've been really in the forefront of getting services and resources for seniors. And COPES program was a Medicaid program that allows people to age in place instead of having to go to a nursing home. And so the Medicaid COPES program can cover care in a person's own home. It can cover care in a family member's home where the elder lives, and it can cover care in an assisted living facility or in an adult family home. So instead of being a huge institution, it could be closer approximation of a home rather than a nursing home. Again, there's a functional needs test. You have to have the need for the care. And then there's a financial needs test. The income test is pretty much the same, but the resources, you're not allowed as many resources as you are in the nursing home program. So again, there may be room for converting assets from the countable resources to exempt resources. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? There are some other programs as well that aren't quite as all-encompassing as the COPES program or the Medicaid nursing home program, but some of these are worth checking into. The Tailored Support for Older Adult program can provide education for caregivers. It can provide some electronic support, maybe like alarms for caregivers. They have a budget for certain things. I don't know exactly what the limits are of what they'll pay for, but it's worth looking into. Another program that is worth looking into that I've helped clients to get onto is the Community First Choice program. As I mentioned previously, a person may not be eligible for benefits through the COPES program or through the Medicaid nursing home program until their resources are pretty low. Well, sometimes we, quote, spend them down by gifting. We may gift to a family member, and that will disqualify somebody for benefits from the COPES or the nursing home program. But we can tap into, sometimes we can tap into this CFC program, and it can cover a large cost of the adult family home cost or in-home cost while there's a penalty period if there was gifting made to bring resources down. So it's a very helpful program for people that aren't eligible for the basic other program because of asset transfers, so if a gift was made. All right, can we do the next slide, please? There are also some resources available, as has been mentioned previously, through the hospice program. Hospice can provide all kinds of in-home support. And so while the requirement is that the expectation of life is 6 months or less, it doesn't mean that after 6 months you are no longer eligible. It means that they'll just extend it if you still have a short life expectancy. And what hospice can provide is they can provide in-home care, bathing assistance, they can provide nursing assistance. If there's a medical emergency, it can keep you from having to go to the emergency room. In fact, you don't go to the emergency room when somebody is on hospice. But sometimes all you want to do is make sure your loved one's comfortable. And that can be provided in the home with the least amount of trauma to your loved one. There's also when your loved one has passed, if they were part of the hospice program, there's programs for the survivors, for the caregivers, for helping with grief and counseling for that. So it's a wonderful program. Another program is palliative care. That is when someone, maybe they have a chronic illness and they don't want a lot of heroic measures. So maybe there's a heart disease, and this person recognizes that they're not going to have procedures for their heart, but they want to be comfortable. So if they have an infection at home, they don't want to have to go to the emergency room. Palliative care can possibly bring care into the home to do, lab testing, to do care for the person in the home. There's another program that I forgot to put on the slide that is really beneficial as well. And this could be for anybody who's had a changing condition, who's on Medicare. And that is the home health program, home health Medicare program. So while what people often get it when they have a transfer from a skilled nursing facility after a hospitalization, and then they go home and they get home health services. You can still also get home health services even if you haven't been in the hospital or your loved one hasn't been in the hospital. If there's a change in condition, it's getting harder to transfer your loved one, or you've had a change in condition, your back is out. Call on the doctor, ask for home health services to see if they can do an evaluation, to look and see, can we make that transfer easier? Is there training that can be done? Is there strengthening that can be done? Is there equipment that can be provided and trained for? And so home health is free. It's part of the Medicare services, and it's not resource-based or income-based. It's part of the Medicare insurance. So I strongly advise people to advocate with your doctors, like was mentioned earlier. Advocate with the doctors, advocate with the care providers to get home health in. And it may not occur to the doctors if they're not geared for that. Could I have the next slide, please? So the last piece of the puzzle that I would talk about and have people look to is the medical pieces of the puzzle. So can we have a next slide, please? One piece of that puzzle is looking to see, is your physician geared to senior needs? For those of us who have children, when our kids were little, we took them to a pediatrician. The pediatrician was specially trained in the unique biology and workings of a child's body, which is different from an adult's body. Similarly, when a person's over the age of 65, their body has gone through changes, and there may be a difference in reaction to medications, or difference in reaction to vitamin deficiencies, or to dehydration than for an average adult. So someone that specializes in working with seniors is someone called a geriatrician. A geriatrician is someone that has taken the time and training to really understand what is different about seniors' bodies. They can recognize things that can be reversed. An example could be if a person has, exhibiting strange mental behaviors, the geriatrician can do a bunch of lab work. They might detect there's a vitamin deficiency, and we need to get those B vitamins up. Maybe there's some depletion of proteins and things like that. Maybe there's not enough fluid intake, and so this geriatrician can turn around a lot of problems. And then there's been studies that have shown that a geriatrician can really make a difference in the quality of life of a senior. They may not prolong the life, but they can really make a difference in the quality of life. So I encourage you, look to see, do your physicians, are they geriatricians? Have they taken training? If they're internal medicine physicians, maybe they've taken extensive training in geriatric medicine. Could I have the next slide, please? Supportive care also. So if you're in a situation where you're taking care of a loved one full time and you're kind of at your wit's end about what to do and how to care for your loved one, or thinking, at what point am I going to need more services in the home? At what point, if at any point, am I going to have to move my loved one? Some person or organization that can help you with that decision-making process and help you pull together the resources is a care manager or care coordinator. That's someone usually like a registered nurse or a medical social worker who have background in this area. They kind of have a gestalt or the big picture of the insurance, how the insurance works, what kind of medications do what, who the great, which care facilities are great and which ones you need to be a little worried about, who provide home health and who are, have a good reputation. And also help planning on like what level of care is this person at. So a care coordinator, a care manager, they can sometimes be provided for or paid for through long-term care insurance. And some people do have long-term and care insurance. So look to see if that's a benefit you can get through that policy. Otherwise, it may be that it has to be paid for privately. And it might be a good investment if you're really at a decision-making nexus, that you're really trying to figure out what do we do, and you want to try to limit the amount of moving you're doing with your senior. You can pay the, it's worth the investment in this person to maybe do an assessment, help you, direct you to resources, and then they can be in the background. They know your senior. If things are going smoothly, then they've done what they need to do for you. But if there's a medical emergency arises, your seniors in the ER again, or their behaviors are difficult to manage, you can call in your care coordinator again to try to help you with resources. And then can I have the next slide? Also, another consideration regarding the medical piece of the puzzle is insurance, medical insurance. So right now, I think we're just about in the open enrollment period. And I encourage people to check with a credentialed or a qualified insurance agent regarding your policy. Now, Medicare is traditional Medicare, but you also may have Medigap policies. You've got your Part D policies. When you speak with an insurance agent that does work with Medicare clients, you don't pay for it. Your premium isn't any different for it, but they can direct you to one that works better for your diagnoses, for the type of medications you take, for the type of protection you want in the future. For example, when I worked as an occupational therapist, I was able to give more care as an occupational therapist to people on traditional Medicare than I was for people who are on managed care. The managed Medicare programs are kind of, they're managed. And so we had to get permission almost constantly to keep working with the person. And in my opinion, we were cut off short sometimes. Whereas Medicare, the traditional Medicare, rehab benefits were more available. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're looking to compare. You might pay less for one type of policy, but what would you be losing if you had an emergency or had a need for that service? So just go in eyes wide open. Let's see, what's the next slide?
Hey,
There, perfect timing. I finished
yeah.
it. So I hope this was helpful to put the pieces together of just trying to pull together all the resources for good quality of life and good care for your loved ones and also for yourselves. Thank you. And were there any questions?
There was quite a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
A lot around cost. So
Mm.
I
That's
think
a big one.
one of the first questions was all of the documents you talked about. What is kind of the average cost to get all that together?
Well, I mean, it depends. I guess it depends on who you're working with, what their price range is. In our office, we do charge a flat fee. For a couple, generally it would be 3,200, and for a single person, it would be 2,000. However, that's for an average client that has resources. I also have sliding scale. If a client really has no resources, we do pro bono in our office, but also we can direct people to resources that they can get for free. Um, if a person has very few resources, it's not as critical that the power of attorney is fancy. It could be a very simple financial power of attorney, naming somebody that you can get online if you are very limited resources. But if you have resources, there's a lot at risk. There are a lot of powers that might be missing from that power of attorney that you get online, that when push comes to shove and you're trying to spend down and get your resources down, the powers aren't in there to do it. Because if somebody's acting for you under a power of attorney and you're incapacitated, they can't make gifts to your loved ones. They can't make gifts for spending down unless the authority is specifically there. Oh, Miss LueRachelle had a question. Go ahead. What's the next question?
Yep, she's got the next series of questions. Do you see them?
Okay.
Do you want me to ask them?
I saw one pop up and
Okay.
I can see them. There was a question about whether the flat fee included the will. The flat fee includes the will for, if it's a couple, it's the will for the couple with the testamentary trusts. It includes the healthcare power of attorney with living will, financial power of attorney, mental health advance directive. For a couple, we also do documents that help prevent Medicaid or the state from trying to make a claim against an estate for a couple when one spouse was on Medicaid. So those two documents are the revocation of community property agreement and also something called a mutual waiver, which says, as a couple, if we intentionally transferred assets from a spouse needing assistance to a spouse not needing assistance, we're doing that intentionally, and we don't want to undone by the state. And so it's a way of preserving your assets and making sure they get down to your kids. I'm sorry, that was a long answer. Yeah, so those are the documents. And then for an individual, a single person, they don't need the last two documents. They don't need the revocation of community property agreement or the mutual waiver. They need the will, the healthcare power of attorney, financial power of attorney, mental health advance directive. One other thing I do recommend people do ahead of time also is to plan ahead for take care of your remains. In Washington State, if you haven't put in writing what you want, the default is burial. Unless your family is pretty much majority of the family agree that something else can be done. So that's another important thing to put in place. I'm
Thanks.
sorry, what else?
Thanks, Stephanie. LueRachelle also is wondering, what's the best way to transfer assets so a family does not have to pay exorbitant amount of inheritance taxes?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that. So in Washington State, you'll be glad to know the inheritance tax doesn't kick in until your estate is 2.19 million. So most of us, average folk, don't come to that level yet. If it is above that level, then you want to talk about perhaps making gifts during lifetime or leaving some of the estate to nonprofits or to charitable organizations or to churches that are obviously nonprofit. In the federal level for estate tax is even higher. It's more than 11 million. So for the foreseeable future, unless your estate is worth more than 2.19 million, death or estate taxes aren't a concern. Now, one thing to think about, though, are something called capital gains taxes. That can happen if you make a gift during your lifetime. So say, for example, I bought a house and I paid $30,000 for it, 40 years ago. And then I want my son to get it. And it's now worth 400,000. If I give it to my son, and then when he sells it, he has to pay the taxes on the profits above the $30,000 I paid if I gift it to him while I'm living. If I put it in my will that he gets it, and when I die he gets it, he only pays tax on any profit over 400,000. So any of your seniors living in the home that they've been in there for 40 years, don't sell it off to pay for care. Try to talk to somebody about, leveraging that asset to get a loan perhaps, or a reverse mortgage, but keep that property titled in that senior's name. And then as long as you can until they pass, so that you get the value of the gained value of the property without the tax hit. So just another little thing to think about.
Thanks, Stephanie. That's great advice. Another question around going back to the Medicaid and the amounts that you had on your slides. So just questioning the 7,963 for a single and the 59,890 for a couple. Is that total assets, including house, income, investments?
So I touched on the terms exempt resources and countable resources. So the numbers that are on the slide are for the countable resources. A house is exempt, so they don't count your house. They don't count one car, the car of most value. That is exempt. A prepaid irrevocable burial or funeral plan is exempt. The things that aren't exempt are cash assets that can be cashed out quickly. Insurance policies with a cash out value, those are countable. So the countable resources are liquid resources, things that can be cashed out for money. The exempt resources are the things you live in or drive. Now, one thing to keep in mind, even though a person could be eligible for Medicaid if they own a house, there could be a lien put on the house. And so for a married couple, we want to at some point get the house transferred out of the spouse's name who needs Medicaid and solely into the spouse's name who doesn't need Medicaid, to avoid a Medicaid lien. And you can't really avoid it when it's a single person.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have another question here. Oh, well, first of all, before we get to the last question, are you able to share your slides with this group here?
What do you mean? I'm sorry. Am I able to share them?
Yeah, are we able to share them with the group after the?
You sure can. Absolutely. Yes.
Great.
Please feel free to use them. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So when is it advisable to do a transfer on death or payable on a car, for example, or payable on death, for example, a car?
Upfront a car? I'm not sure I understand. I've heard it. So let me back up. What I'm hearing is the question about transfer on death assets. One can do something for a transfer on death transfer for a bank account. That can be a transfer on death account or asset. And what you're doing is you're talking to your bank or whoever's holding your assets, and you're saying you have a contract with them, and you're saying, when I pass, I want this to be paid to this loved one or to this person I care about. Also, you can do the same thing with real estate. You can execute what's called a transfer on death deed. It's a deed that's recorded in the county where the property's held, and it is stating that when you pass away, the title owner of the property is this person or people you've named. All it has to be done to make it legal is to file the death certificate or record the death certificate with the property. And so it's a way of transferring assets without having to go through the probate process. So the advantage of doing that, of doing pay on death, transfer on death assets, is it does get your assets to your loved one pretty quickly. All that has to be done is producing a death certificate. And it's pretty inexpensive to do it. You don't have to hire an attorney. You just work with the insurance company or with the bank or with the county recorder. A disadvantage, though, is you don't get to protect people that maybe have a disability or people that are underage. You don't ever use the will for any asset that's pay on death. The will is very useful because it has a bunch of tools in it. And what happens is you put all these tools in it while you're living. When you pass away, your personal representative looks and to see what are the circumstances here. Is there a beneficiary with a disability? Is there a beneficiary who's underage? The personal representative can then protect that person or those people in the trust inside the will. Whereas with the pay on death transfer, your beneficiary may be disabled and getting Medicaid benefits, and then they inherit $20,000 from you, and then they get bumped off Medicaid until they expend that down, and then they have to go through the trouble of getting back on again. And so it can be really problematic. You know, even though you're intending to take care of somebody, there can be an impact you aren't anticipating. Yeah.
Okay, Stephanie, I think we had a couple more questions come on and then we'll wrap this up.
Okay.
And so I think if you could just clarify around the house, is that include a home that's already paid off or that has mortgage? And let's see, can you pay on death regarding a house to 2 or more?
Okay, so the first question is, you know, when you're looking at the house as an exempt resource in Medicaid, for Medicaid purposes, it has to be a house you're living in or intend to live in. So a person may be temporarily in an adult family home, but if they hope to intend to return home again, that resource can be exempt. It doesn't matter if there's a mortgage on it or not. It's just that the resource is not counted. However, there can be a lien, again, as I mentioned, there can be a lien on the house. So the money for the mortgage would be taken off first when the debts are paid, and then the lien to Medicaid would be paid as well. And then the second question was about the transfer on death deeds, and you can name more than one person. You can say, I leave to my 2 children, and each of them equal owners, 100% owners. And that when the first of them dies, the survivor is the owner. And that would be like a joint tenancy. They call that joint tenancy. Or I could be the tenants in common. 50% to this child, 50% to this child. And it always stays that way, that they're the 50-50 owner. One can buy the other out. When they sell it, the proceeds are 50-50. So you can name more than one person and more than one way of having the title.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Yeah.
So we are at time and we'll pass it back to Margaret.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank
That
you.
was very valuable information.
Thank you.
As we just learned, it's not only important work on living well, but it's equally important to plan the best end of life experience too. Thank you again. In closing, we have reached the end of our program today, and I really hope you were inspired and learned something new too. The planning committee would really like your feedback about today's event. An email will be sent on Monday with a link to the evaluation. We ask you to please complete the online evaluation as soon as possible. For those interested in receiving CEUs, please email Karen Winston. Thank you very much, everyone, and be well and be safe. See you next year, November 12th, 2022.